You doing door closed or open?
Yeah, let me close the door.
I'm going to be shivering. Let me know when y'all want me to start rolling.
Thank you. Does that work?
Sure. You ready? All right. Well, thank you all for being here this afternoon. We've just released the revisions to the plan that will include the consolidations that are tied to our turnaround plans, as well as programmatic movements and changes within Austin ISD. In total, 10 schools will be recommended for consolidation as part of this phase of the plan. And I also just kind of want to reinforce how we got here and why this work is very much needed to be completed within Austin ISD. When we started on this work 9 months ago, there were many things, and there continue to be many things putting pressure within the educational system here in Austin ISD. And you hear them all the time. There's declining enrollment, ever increasing cost of education. We talk often about wanting to have sustained programs and really be intentional about how we drive down our costs so that our dollars are going towards staff and programming, which is where they need to be. That's where our dollars need to be and where they need to go. And over the course of a period of time, we've gotten to a point where we just cannot ensure that every student in Austin ISD gets what they need to be academically successful. And we need to do something bold. We need to do something big to evolve, to ensure that as a system we grow and we are in a healthy, vibrant school system for years to come. And so when we started this work, we had some objectives, right? We wanted to align feeder patterns in Austin ISD. I think I've said that many, many times. It's something that is very important to me as far as getting done while I'm here as a superintendent. And Austin ISD align and we do not in others. And when you have the number of splits that we have, especially in East Austin, you cannot keep community together. It's very difficult to align programming. So we wanted to take on a comprehensive boundary change to align boundaries, as well as reduce the number of open seats or empty seats that we have in our school district, kind of referring back to the loss in enrollment over the last many years, really driven by affordability and just the movement of students. And so this plan also included boundary changes. It needed to be mindful of consolidations to reduce overall cost. We needed to address transfer policies that had been in place for a very long time. And we also wanted to make sure that whatever we did, we aligned this work to the state requirements for turnaround plans. And we know the accountability system has changed over the last many years, but there's a lot of work to do in Austin ISD. We are not where we need to be. We take full ownership of it. And in order to get to where we need to go, we have to have the resources to be able to do so. And so the turnaround plans are incorporated into this work. And lastly, programs, wall-to-wall dual language programs, as well as our Montessori program, needed to have stability. With the changes in the law and the pressure that we have to ensure that every student has a licensed teacher in front of them, and in this specific program for wall-to-wall dual language programs, it was the need to have certified dual language teachers And the way to ensure that we can do that is to have the appropriate number of emergent bilingual students in those programs. And what we know is that those students are not accessing these programs, and so we wanted to move the programs to where they are to increase access. And so here, just moments ago, we've taken a big first step in getting the process and the plan across the finish line. We have 2 agenda items that we are uploading for our board to consider next Thursday. The first are the turnaround plans, and the second are program moves and the consolidations associated with them. And so at a high level, I know that many of our community members are very familiar with the kind of initial plan that was released on October 3rd, the refined plan that was released on October 31st, and the milestone changes that we made kind of since then. And so what I'm going to call out now are some of the changes since we've made the adjustment in the milestone schedule. So these are kind of the highlights of some of the changes that you can see that I want our community to be aware of as we prepare for the vote next week. The first is Riley Elementary School. And so Riley Elementary School currently functions as a dual language campus. It also has Montessori. It also has Mandarin. The plan does include and has included for a time now for that program to relocate to Wooten, which is a modernized facility, which will be a modernized facility. And one of the things that we were trying to address was where to place the Montessori program in Austin ISD. You know, on the 31st of October, that plan included the relocation of the Wynn Montessori program to Go Valley Elementary School. And based on feedback from our community and the concern around displacing students who have been historically underserved, we felt, after much consideration, that move and that change was not something that we could support. We did look at other schools in the area, most notably Zavala and Ortega. Again, this is based on feedback from our trustees in a work session, but ultimately we felt like we needed to think about it differently. And so ultimately we did decide to kind of modify the Montessori program, and instead of it being a wall-to-wall program, it's going to be a strand of programming now located at Riley. So the reason this works is because Riley effectively is a newly developed kind of restarted school, because the program as a whole that currently exists is moving to Wooten. So that gave us a unique opportunity to add programming, create an identity for Riley. We've communicated with the communities, and this is all comes together with spending intentional time with community, getting community voice in, and so we feel very confident that solution will kind of balance our ability to support Montessori, reinforce our support of Montessori, but also acknowledge that in the state's accountability system, that balance of Montessori program with traditional programming ensures that we'll be successful long term. The other thing I wanted to be responsive to was just the concern of any splits that were moving students to a school that also had historically not met accountability. Though we've seen great progress in our schools and they're all like so very close, we wanted to acknowledge that and make some adjustments. And one of those adjustments includes Wadane Elementary School. So Wadane Elementary School was previously going to be split between Houston Elementary School and Rodriguez. And after spending time with the community and based on feedback from our trustees, we've made the decision to relocate the Wadane Elementary School by way of a reassignment wholly to Rodriguez. So instead of doing a split to Houston and Rodriguez, now we're wholly going to Rodriguez. Rodriguez, with the accountability history and the stability that is there, gives us a really good opportunity to break the accountability chain, but more importantly, give our students what they need to be academically successful. Again, reducing disruption and not moving students to a school that, even though we felt would be successful historically, had not been. One of the other changes that I think is notable, and this applies to the 3 schools that are transitioning into a wall-to-wall dual language program, is this concern that we had, and we certainly heard it from our community and from our trustees, about displacing students or reassigning students from from Pickle, Wooten, and Sanchez. Pickle and Wooten both being 2 UA or 2 unacceptable accountability, and Sanchez being 3. And so the previous plan on the 31st included reassigning those students to a nearby campus and then kind of launching the wall-to-wall dual language program. And what we heard and what we certainly recognized as part of this was that it would be displacing students who those schools were built for and intended for. And we really wanted to make sure that we kept the neighborhood school and the students at that school as best we could. And so the best way to do that was to actually kind of pivot and transition into a restart instead of a reassignment. And so what the restart allows us to do is to ensure that those students zoned to that school remain the priority of that school. And given the size of the schools, all other seats will be made available to the incoming program. So an example of this would be Sanchez. The attendance boundary would be largely left intact. We would provide ESL for the students that resided, and then have plenty of spaces to welcome the students from Becker who wanted to take advantage of the two-way dual language program with additional capacity at Sanchez. and so what you'll see in the document is just a recognition of how that priority transfer will work for each of these schools. So for Sanchez, it'll be zone students first, then it'll be Becker students, and then it'll be any students from the other dual language wall-to-wall campuses, so Ridgetop, Riley, or Sunset Valley, and then lastly, any other student that wants to come in. And the same would be true for the others, right? So for Pickle, you would see neighborhood students first, no longer transferring to Hart, and then you would see Ridgetop, and then you would see Riley, Becker, and Odom. And then the same would be true for Wooten. And so in this way, we can be really responsive to what we heard. We can ensure that our students who are in the neighborhood are prioritized in this process. It allows us to really maintain the emerging bilingual student population that we want to achieve, and also with the size of those schools have plenty of space to welcome those programs that are transitioning into those new schools. So a couple of things that I just want to speak to before we open it up for questions. I am someone who believes in community engagement and strongly believes that as hard as a conversation is, if we are honest and candid about what we're trying to do together, the solution will improve. And anytime we're exploring an idea, I share with our community that we are exploring an idea. And that certainly was the case for the last week and a half. We were exploring ideas about Oak Springs potentially moving to Blackshear, and then at some future date perhaps moving back to Oak Springs. Again, an idea that came out of the community. There's no decision. That's not part of this recommendation to the Board of Trustees for approval. The recommendation for the board is merely around the turnaround plan, right? Moving Oak Springs to Blackshear. Where the community and where the school ultimately resides is still a part of the discussion with community. I've had 3 or 4 meetings in the last week alone to try to drive that conversation. I expect that it'll be resolved before the end of the semester, and then we'll take action at that point. The other is Martin, Mendez, ALC, and Garza. This is another idea that came out of the work session with our trustees. I communicated to those communities that we're going to be exploring different ideas. And I was being really responsive to things that I'd heard, including wanting to activate Martin and have AISD students be there sooner than later, right? If you go through a comprehensive planning process to re-envision a school, that could take 2 years. So I was trying to be responsive to that. I wanted to be responsive to the fact that we have lots of middle school students who would benefit greatly from a program similar to Garza. And so what would it look like if you expanded Garza? Certainly recognizing that the uniqueness of Garza, the cohort, the lack of cohort there allows us to maintain a specialized accountability kind of process that is very beneficial to those students. And so to work through that, it's going to take some time. And ALC, it's been temporarily located at Mendez. This is part of the construction of teacher housing and workforce housing in Nita Coy. And so I wanted to find a home for ALC long term because we think there's a really great opportunity to improve the programming at ALC. We've been working with Dr. Green for the better part of a year. We can be doing better for those students, and I intend to do so. So I was really trying to find a solution that addressed all of that, and also recognizing that Mendez is going to come back to Austin ISD. The date is not certain yet, but that is our school. We want to welcome our students, and we want to be very intentional about having a strong program when we do welcome them. And so we were kind of looking at exploring all of that. We weren't able to really progress it too far, just acknowledging the complexity of all of those changes. So that work will continue, as well as all the work associated with boundary changes and balance enrollment tied to school consolidations. Just to be clear, because I've been asked this a lot of times, like that work is going to continue. It is not stopping. I am working with the board to identify a new timeline. This work is important. It needs to get done, and we cannot continue on. The amount of strain in the system and the pressure of this work is a lot, and it needs to end. So just wanted to share those updates and highlights, and really just before I open to questions to say, thank you to the Austin ISD community, thank you to our principals, thank you to the team, thank you to our students. It is a long process. I'm someone that believes in process. I'm very proud of the work, and I'm hopeful that we're able to take the vote and begin planning for transition, because it's all about transition planning. That's how we ensure success and implementation as we start the 26-27 school year. All right, floor is y'all's.
Could you talk about just future exploration? Just I think when parents of Maplewood, Brycklewoods, and Palms see that they're not on maybe the initial list that goes out, there still could be possibility of closure in the future.
Yes. So, we like I've said, we analyze everything. And to analyze everything, it is truly resource intensive. It just is. Even the conversation I just shared with you all about exploring Garza, like it takes hours and hours and hours upon hours to really understand what a move could look like, how to support it. And so when you think about boundaries as a whole and the hundreds of boundary changes we were considering, as well as balanced enrollment, it takes time to analyze everything and do it well and ensure that we arrived at a solution that best represents the constraints that we're operating in, meets our objectives, but also incorporates community voice. And so, it is not stopping. We are going to continue on. The way that I look at it is, we're going to take like a half step back to make sure we're capturing everything, create a little bit of breathing room as we start the next part of this work, and bring it back in a fairly expedited manner. Our trustees have been very clear with me that they want to see this come back sooner than later. I am also very realistic and very honest with our trustees about what can be done and still maintain the quality of the deliverable that I expect. So it'll be picked up in short order. I don't have a precise timeline yet, but it's going to go relatively quickly. And we will modify the process, right, to ensure we capture all voice now that we kind of have this adjustment in timeline.
And just one follow-up. From the original plan to this one, have you all kept track of the number of students maybe impacted? Has that reduced from that original plan to what we have now?
Yeah. So one of the things that we'll state in the kind of the opening part of the report is just a number of students that are moving or reassigned as part of this work. I don't have it in front of me, or actually maybe I do. But we do state that it has come down just slightly. So in total, 3,796 students have been reassigned, and 6,300 seats have been eliminated under this portion of the plan. So it's less than what we would have otherwise, right? Because all those boundary changes didn't occur, and those consolidations didn't occur. So I do expect this number to grow, right, with that phase coming back online. But yeah, it was a little bit of a reduction, but we're still able to consolidate 10 of 13 schools, which represents over $20 million in reductions in costs. So not the complete plan, but certainly a substantial portion of it.
concerns about the integrity of the process. Where does that internal investigation stand?
Yeah, it's being led by our Office of Professional Standards. Data collection is ongoing. I really can't say more than that, but that it is progressing, and it's being led by Office of Professional Standards, overseen by our General Counsel's office.
Are there people on leave because of this?
Yes.
How many?
2.
What percentage of this plan release today would you say was a direct result of community feedback?
Oh my goodness. It's hard to say a percent, right? I would say every aspect of it was informed in some way. I mean, I was going through just earlier today, line by line, like everything that I, just because that's how I am, of the deliverable. And so when you look at every one of these changes, if it ends up even be the sequence of how communities access programs. An example of this is we heard loud and clear from certain communities when it comes to the wall-to-wall dual language programs that though the campus is here, I may live over here. And where you're sending my campus program to maybe a little too far, so would it be okay to access this program that is another wall-to-wall language program but maybe slightly closer to me? And so even in that, like, it allows us to kind of reset the sequence of transfers and priority in our system. We heard from community a lot about, and I agree with this, about not disrupting historically underserved student populations who had investments like made in their communities with them in mind. Most notably Sanchez, or the work around Wooten and Pickle, and so we changed the process. Right, we went, instead of going to a reassign, we did a restart. I think about Wynn Montessori, and relocating that to Go Valley, and the initial intention of it was to reduce the number of seats in that part of town, at the same time not have to close an additional school. We heard from community, I heard from our board, and said, it's okay to have a little bit of less of efficiency here because we're really protecting those students who've been historically underserved, and these schools are built for them, especially Go Valley being a modernized school. And so we pivoted, we adjusted, we learned, we made some, and that's who we are as a school district, and I love that. It's hard to do it well, but now we arrived at Riley as the home location, and so yeah, it is embedded throughout. And I think when you go to each one of these decisions, not only in the decision itself but also implementation, you will see an alignment, and I can speak to, in almost every case, a kind of community voice and kind of where it came in and how it's been codified into the plan.
And this release is the first part of the district's plan, right? So when can we expect a second part?
Yeah, so it's been a big push to get this one out. My hope is to get the vote on the 20th so we can upload on the 21st. I'll then identify the principals in early December, and then we'll start the process of transitioning at that point for these 10 schools as well as any adjacent programming. Over that same period of time, I'm rebaselining the work around boundary changes and balance enrollment for consolidations. My hope is to have a very clear update to our trustees in the December information session to say this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it, and this is the timeline that we're going to do it in. So I wouldn't expect to see a deliverable on the board work session, information session in December. That's a very short turnaround time. But you will see an updated timeline with deliverables and a resource allocation to ensure we can get the work done. This is not going to linger. This is too much. And I think about what we've been doing over the last 3 years together. We had the TA agreed order. We just came, right before that we had the 2022 bond program. Then we had the tax rate election. Then we had budget challenges that caused us to make pretty significant changes. And now we're tackling this. And it's all the same people. It's the same executive directors who are providing oversight and support to our principals. It's the same assistant superintendents who are thinking about all the different moves with me that should also be overseeing each of their divisions. So it is a strain on the system. It's a strain on our community. And so I'm hopeful to get past this. And then once we take the next piece on, this will be codified. And so we'll build from it, opposed to having it kind of run in parallel. So that's what we're looking at bringing forward.
I want to go back to the question that was asked about community feedback. You mentioned several pivots that AISD has made
Yeah.
over the past couple months in response to community feedback. We also talked at the beginning of this process about how the district wasn't going to consider the quote loudest voices as the driving force behind
Yeah.
this plan. Could you talk about the difference between those two? Where do you consider making concessions and listening to feedback versus not?
Yeah. So it is a balance. It's not the number of comment cards, right? It's not the number of emails or calls. That does not drive my decision making. It never has. It never will. What drives is and this is really it's a skill, I would say, that has to be developed. As you work in a very complex ecosystem as we do here in Austin ISD. And so what we're always listening for and trying to understand is, are the ideas being brought forward being responsive to our overall objective as a school district, right? And a lot of times, when I hear community voice, it sometimes it's very it's localized, right? Because it's where their student goes to school, and I get that. My kiddos go to school, and I'm right there. I have to take a step back and think about the 70,000 students that we support. But in those conversations, there are always ideas and ways to make things better. And so as things come to me, it is my responsibility to kind of be the last sieve or the last kind of person who creates that balance. And so what happens is you get thousands of comments. I go to lots of community meetings. I listen, I take notes, I think about, the idea that came forward. It doesn't matter if it was one idea from one person or, 1,000 ideas from 1,000 different people, but are all the same. If it moves us in the right direction and is responsive to community need, we're going to explore it. Where it becomes a challenge is when you have two things that are like guiding principles that ultimately come into conflict with one another. An example of this would be we had started out wanting to achieve an 85 to 95% balanced enrollment within Austin ISD. And if you use it as a starting point, you're going to get to a really good spot. But there are going to be instances where 82% creates a much less disruption than actually getting to that 85%, right? And that's where it's important that we acknowledge that we can be firm, but then we can also be flexible when we need to be. As long as the overall goal is still moving forward, we're going to be okay. And whenever you take these efforts on, that type of balance within the system and concession between objectives and goals really can't be implemented by every single person. Or it really needs to drive to a point where someone who has the authority with feedback from the board, kind of calls it one way or the other. And so it's I can tell you it can be challenging to make sure you have that balance. I always think about whose voice is not at the table, and that's why it's like a lot of what has driven me is understanding what we received in comment cards, but then going to the community meetings. I have been and led 20 plus community meetings in the last probably 3 weeks. I mean, y'all have seen me out there. I think each one of these is 2.5, 3, sometimes 4 hours long, and I'm talking with staff afterwards. I'm meeting with principals, following up, and sometimes it'll be as simple as, "Hey, Matthias, we're not thrilled about it because of how it impacts us, but this is one thing that we think could help. Could you look at this?" And in my mind, I respond to that as, well, the overall objective is still being met. The way that we get there can be adjusted ever so slightly, and we can be responsive to community, or in some cases a big change, right? So think about when Montessori and Go Valley and that whole conversation. Go Valley was not the loudest voice by any means, right? It wasn't, but for me, it was one of these things where I was trying to be responsive to the Montessori, the fact that it had been a program that it was, very attractive to lots of families in Austin. I wanted to reduce the number of seats between Ortega, Zavala, Sanchez, and Go Valley. And so we found a solution that kind of addressed all of that. But hearing from community and hearing from our trustees, it was that kind of tension between number of seats versus stabilizing a program kind of created that conflict. And so I had to resolve it and find a solution and be okay with, not meeting an objective here, because overall we're still going to get there, right? So I will tell you that it requires listening a lot. I don't do a lot of talking unless I absolutely have to. Pushing to analyze things that you may think are already understood, even though they don't always are, right? Like sometimes, we'll be asked to explore something, and maybe sometimes someone says, well, we already know what the answer is, let's, and they'll kind of push it off. But even in analyzing something, you learn something about that community, and that helps inform either the implementation or another solution elsewhere in the community. So that work alone is very valuable. So it's really my responsibility to ensure that balance. I have to protect the balance, but it can be hard. It really can be hard. But I also want to be really clear that the opposite can be true. You can have lots of people, sharing an idea, and that idea can be really good. So it's not always assumed that just because volume or the energy behind something doesn't mean that it's not a good idea. And so I also have to be really humble about approaching that work in that way as well, which is why every time I go into a conversation, I'm like a blank slate. Like, we're going to talk about it. I'll share with you what I can and can't support. And I've gone to lots of meetings, and I'll tell a community, hey, this is why I can't support this. I want to spend our time together working through what I can support. And I think that gets us to work on the important, quicker than maybe we would otherwise.
Okay, we have time for 2 more questions.
Have you heard from the TEA at all about the progress of this plan so far?
So the Texas Education Agency, we work with them quite a bit. We work with them through our TA Agreed Order for Special Education, and then they have resources and teams that provide reviews and oversight to these plans. And so we've been meeting with them all along. We met with them as recently as, I think, Monday of this week, Tuesday of this week, just to provide updates. Especially we thought about some adjustments in the turnaround plans. It's been positive feedback. I believe that they think that we're approaching it the right way. Comprehensive is always going to be the better approach, opposed to discrete changes, because what I want, and I think what the agency wants, is system improvement, right? And how we get there, I want to do it the Austin way. And I think as long as I can be responsive and ensure we grow, and all of our students are on grade level, and we're taking ownership of why they're not now, I think we're going to be okay. Which is why it's so important for me to be really honest about what is firm and fixed, and what we're able to do as a system. And I think this plan balances both. But yes, we get feedback. No one's said the TSOs are going to be approved, but we ask for feedback and we get feedback. And I don't know that lots of school districts do that. We ask a lot. Maybe it's because we're right here in their backyard. Maybe it's because of our size. But they are Texas Education. They are an agency of the state. They are paid for using tax dollars. So we ask questions all the time. Region 13 is also a great resource for us as well.
For the restarting schools with the turnaround plan, could you talk a little bit about how the district is going to support teachers in improving student performance, the goal of the turnarounds? And if it's okay, I could another second question.
Yeah.
Does the district have a contingency plan for if the turnaround plans are not approved?
Yeah, so 2 things. We have incredible educators doing incredible things. And where we have come out of, which is a period of disruption of the last 2.5 years, we had lots of new educators coming into the workforce, lots of teachers on alternative certifications. We as a system were not providing the professional development required to ensure that they were successful. And and that's an us problem. Like that's an Austin ISD problem. You know, and an example that I'll share with you that has been a big change over the last year is in years past, we would take all of our teachers and we would go and provide professional development, and they would go back into the classroom. But what we weren't doing, we're ensuring that the principals and the executive directors had as a good understanding of the curriculum and what was to be expected in the classroom as the teachers. And so what was happening is our educators were doing the work, but there wasn't always that real-time coaching and support that you really want to have if you're going to continuously improve. Right? You shouldn't wait to come back to a professional development opportunity, every 4 weeks to figure out if you're, growing professionally. No, it should be like anywhere else, like continuous coaching, continuous support and feedback. And so we've doubled down. It is my expectation that our principals, our instructional leaders, that is how we have to operate if we're going to be successful. At the same time, our teachers didn't have the resources available to them. We procured curriculum, we procured consumables, we did an inventory of all of our manipulatives. So now we have the training, we have the data that allows our educators to understand where their students are, and we have the resources so that when they're using what they've learned, they're doing it with fidelity because now they have the tools. And so those are system problems that we've been able to solve. And what you're going to see at these schools is a strong reinforcement of that, but also additional supports. Like if you have students that need additional interventions, like level 2 or level 3 interventions, that we're providing additional content interventionists to support the educator to get those students back on grade level. If you're going to pull a small group, and you have a disproportionate number of students that need that support, and it's just one teacher, you need more support. So we bring the content interventionists, and that's one of the ways that we're going to be able to, with confidence, ensure that our students and that our schools break these accountability chains. Regarding contingency plans or what happens if they're rejected, so there are hundreds of these plans being submitted on the 21st, all across the state of Texas, maybe even over 1,000 between 2 UA and 3 UA. The way that it works is there's a 45-day period where the agency reviews and can decline or not accept, and then the district can resubmit, and for a 15-day period, and then the agency can accept or reject. If it's not accepted at that point, then the commissioner can move towards a conservator or actually install a board of managers. Do we have a contingency plan? We know, what the alternative path would be if any one of these were rejected. And based on how the agency has been working with us in a collaborative fashion, I don't expect that it'll be a black box and then all of a sudden it'll just be canceled, right? I think what will end up happening is, hey, Matthias, this is an opportunity for improvement here. If you make these changes, we could probably support the plan. I'm not expecting a whole lot of that because we have been engaged with them this entire time. But in the event that we did get to the end and it was not accepted, then we would absolutely have to move forward with something that we knew would be accepted. And those are, there aren't many options like that, right? Essentially, an 18A2 partnership is really what you have, or a complete reassignment to an A or B or C school.
Austin ISD isn't the only school that's facing closures or programs. We've seen
Oh, yeah.
closures in Central Texas.
Oh, there's lots of them. Mm-hmm.
I want to just talk on the point that, we've seen, I think Killeen ISD I saw recently is closing. What would you say is the current state of public education and funding and support? Because we're seeing this across the state, and I think a lot of parents are worried.
Yeah. So I would say that it's, being someone who's a product of Austin ISD, loves public education, will do anything for it. It is dire, is what I would say. I would say that, it's kind of that old, analogy where, if there's one fish in the water that's dead, it's probably something wrong with the fish. If there's a couple, there's probably something, wrong with food. But if every fish is dead, then, something's wrong with the water. And what is happening right now, when you look at the sheer number of school districts that are having to close, something's wrong with the water. Funding hasn't moved. We're doing our best. The pressures mount I don't know if our families and communities really understand the pressures of the federal government. Changes have how they've been felt in our schools. You know, Title II, Title III, Title IV dollars, immigration changes. You know, have seen a huge reduction in families accessing public education, and so those things just add up, right? And they've been adding up for a long time. And then you add onto that the fact that when you're in an urban environment, the cost of living is very, very high. In order to compete, I have to have higher, more competitive salaries, and that puts pressure in our budget. And I think what we're seeing are more and more school districts having fewer and fewer options to be able to address that. Which is why, for me, it is so important that we do the hard work and we reduce our reliance on the things that we can't control. What I can control is what the state allocates towards for every student that's in our seats every single day. And I can't rely on grants. I can't really rely on future funds coming from the federal government in the way that we have in the past, which is why right now getting very efficient, focusing on those things that are fully aligned with our values but also move student outcomes is critically important. And I'm never going to be in a place where we're out of position. I've been asked, many times, Matthias, it's not even that bad yet, or you could wait a little longer. And what I tell people is, there are lots of school districts that are going through state interventions right now, or that have even bigger challenges. And I promise you that they wish they would have made decisions years prior. And so it's hard, and there's lots of energy, and it's resource consuming, it's very tiring, but we love our kids, we love our school district, and we're going to protect who we are no matter what. And so, that's what I would say about that.
So you said that being empathetic and transparent in this process is something that's been super important for you, but I've spoken to some parents who aren't really feeling those things from the district. What is your response to that? Yeah,
I want to understand why. We communicate more than almost any school district ever would or has around anything like this. I'm very honest about where we are in the process. We share the data. Our deliverables, I would compare them to any school district in the country when it comes to these types of efforts. I understand when that is said, where it comes from. It's usually from a place of not knowing kind of where we are or what's happening. But I'm genuine when I say, what I'm sharing is precisely where we are. I also think we could do a better job as a school district of communicating what's happening. Families don't have the same access to information that other families have, and so could we do better about sharing where we are at each specific school? We could, and we try to. It's just given our scale and given limited resources we have, if I'm communicating at that level to every single school at every milestone, it's not sustainable. So we do our best, and I hope when our families do engage with us, they see it as being genuine, and hopefully they see that we're responsive. I do get that from time to time, and it's hard to have a better answer than we're doing the absolute best that we can. And if things were different, then maybe we'd be able to do things differently. But we are very much trying. And when things are shared with us, whether it's an email, a phone call, or a comment card, or just a verbal communication in a meeting, like, we take that to heart. It incorporates itself into the work, and then we take the next step. And I think, when you look at the documents and the work, families will see themselves in it. Maybe they won't see what they want, but they'll be able to see that we were responsive.
Okay, that's all the time we have, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
If you have any other questions
Appreciate you.
that you didn't get answered, you can email us, and we'll make sure to get those answers for you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
So that they know that you came here?
No, to just my editor gets on.
So, like,
Yeah.
I'll.
I appreciate
Yeah, so have y'all heard of other schools? I mean,